Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for President of the United States of America. Well, this is day 24 of the media boycott of my candidacy and my campaign. I've been evaluating the other candidates, trying to find some basis upon which they could say, well, the reason why we're not covering E.W. Jackson is, and I can't find it. And I think I'm a fairly honest broker. I'm looking for it, but I can't find it. It's entirely subjective. I mean, and who knows? I mean, who knows what it's really all about? I mean, it could be the LGBTQ mafia controlling these media outlets. The secular media has completely shut me out. And that's going to break. It will break. They will be forced to recognize me. But that's just the way it is right now. And I've got a list of candidates that I've been making who I know can never win the nomination. They can't because they don't appeal sufficiently to our base. They simply cannot win the nomination. They can't. It's impossible. They've got zero chance. That's not true for me. I know I do appeal to the base. Of course, the base has got to know that I'm running, and we're working very hard on our own to get the word out. We're doing social media. And obviously, we're going to start doing some of our own paid advertising. We're setting up our super PAC to try to get some major donors to give some money so a super PAC can help my candidacy. Of course, we won't be coordinated with the super PAC. When I say we're setting it up, I'm giving the instructions to get it done, and others will have to take it and run with it, independent of me and my campaign, of course. But we're getting that set up. We're establishing a finance committee. So we're doing all the things the campaign does, but obviously, it's not enough. And remember, I'm the guy who has been on, I used to be on Fox News 2 or 3 times a week. I've been on ABC. I've been on CNN. I've been on MSNBC a long time ago on MSNBC. But I've done Megyn Kelly. I used to do Bill O'Reilly. I've done Fox and Friends in the morning on multiple occasions. And now, over the last several years, nothing. I don't think that's an accidental coincidence. Do you? I don't think I've gotten uglier or changed in any way. I'm the same conservative now that I was then. Things have gotten worse, of course, and I've taken some stance that they probably don't particularly want to hear. But nevertheless, that's where we are. And I just need you all to be prayerful. Remember, I'm a Marine. I don't quit because a hill is tough. I just need you all to be prayerful and do everything you can to support me and speak up for me when you can and say, well, wait a minute. E.W. Jackson is in the race. Why aren't you acknowledging that? In fact, I have the direct email for contact at Fox. And we had been communicating, and then when I mentioned my candidacy and said, is Fox going to have me on, zip. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think something's going on. And if I'm the person that they don't want, if I'm the person that they most want to stop, that tells you that they've got some real fear of a candidacy like mine. I mean, right? I mean, that's what it says. Because otherwise, I mean, who cares? I mean, they're putting up these candidates and they have no chance whatsoever of winning. None. But they are afraid that I could galvanize the Christian community and galvanize the evangelical community and put some things on the table that they really don't want to hear. And that's what's going on here. So what I need you to do, go to my website, ewjacksonforpresident.com, sign up as a volunteer, and we will put you to work, believe me, because we've got multiple states to get on the ballot. I'm heading for Iowa in about the next week or so, and we'll be spending a few days in Iowa. And, of course, I'm going to be pounding the pavement very hard in Iowa because we intend to try to win the Iowa caucuses. Yeah, I'll say it again. We intend to try to win the Iowa caucuses. I'm not listening to what these people are saying. I'm not listening to what they're I don't care what these pundits think. We're going to shock them. And not because I'm great, because that's not the way I think, but because I believe I represent the sentiments of the American people overwhelmingly. And in some cases, they're so glad to hear me express it, but they know in many cases they can't express exactly what they're feeling because it would be so damaging to them, because the leftist cabal is trying to punish and destroy anybody who doesn't agree with their perspective. Now that's just where we are. Okay? So go to my website, ewjacksonforpresident.com. Again, we've got our 20-20-20 pathway to victory. I'm asking you to pray for me for 20 minutes a week. And I know that 20 minutes seems like a long time to pray. But of course, if you're a Christian and you pray every day, just include me in your prayers. 3 minutes of praying for my campaign. Pray for our staffing. I need the right people around me. Pray for our finances. We need a lot of money in order to do this effectively. Pray for our media hits, that we need a breakthrough in the media. We need the media to be forced to pay attention to my candidacy. So there's plenty to pray about. Obviously, pray for my health, my well-being. Pray for my family. Pray for my church. Pray for STAND, because all these organizations, all of these efforts, church is not an organization, an organism, the body of Christ, but they're depending upon my leadership. And I've got to continue to give leadership. I've not resigned from anything. I've got to continue to give leadership to these efforts, even while I'm running for president of the United States. You say, well, why not? I don't see anybody else resigning from anything that they were doing. But of course, very often they look at a Christian. They say, well, how can you be a candidate and a pastor? Well, how can you be a candidate and a Wall Street investor? How can you be a candidate and a governor? How can you be a candidate and a senator? So please, this stuff is so hypocritical that it's just ridiculous. I won't give you my list right now because I'm still kind of working on it and massaging it, but I'm making up a list of candidates who cannot win, can't win. And of course, the premise is for any of the other candidates, those who potentially could appeal sufficiently to the Republican base to win, is that something's got to happen with Donald Trump. And I'm not wishing any ill will on Donald Trump, by the way, but something would have to happen that he would be moved out of the way, because, of course, he's got a commanding lead over all the other candidates, all of them. And so something would have to happen to have a breakthrough moment in which other candidates really had a real shot at it, because nobody's going to overcome Donald Trump, I don't believe. Nobody's going to just kind of out-campaign Donald Trump, because I think he's got a base. It's not a majority, but he's got a base that is unshakable, a base of people they're not going to move. So you'd have to win more people to you than he has with him, and maybe win some of those who are with him away from him in order to actually overcome him, overwhelm him, defeat him. That's a tall order. That's a very, very, very tall order. I'm not saying it's impossible. But however it happens, let's just, for the moment, just for the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion, let's say Donald Trump's moved out of the way, okay? And this is for the sake of discussion now, okay? Like I said, I wish no ill will on Donald Trump whatsoever, okay? Let me just make that clear. But let's say for the sake of argument, he was no longer, for whatever reason, was no longer a candidate, and all the rest of the candidates had to vie. There's some candidates who aren't going anywhere because they're simply out of sync with the Republican base. They can forget it. They're done. Stick a pin in them. And in the meantime, why the media is discriminating against me, I don't know, because all of them are long shots. All of us are long shots with Donald Trump in the race, right? All of us. That doesn't mean, again, doesn't mean it's impossible, because with men things are impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God, and all things are possible to them that believe. Now, I'm the last candidate to jump in the race, but I'll remind you what the scripture says: the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Thank you, Jesus. All right, look, I want to talk to you today about the hearings up on the Hill yesterday over the Afghanistan debacle. If you saw any of that, and maybe you didn't, this is heartbreaking stuff. These 13 folks, 13 of our servicemen and women who were murdered, and they're using the word murdered. I saw the parents using the word murdered, and I thought, you know, that is apropos, because we were supposed to be evacuating under the protection of the Taliban. Now you got to have BBs for brains. I mean, that's like helping Iran gain nuclear materials on the theory that, well, they're not going to develop a nuclear weapon. Yeah, to me, it's the same thing. Oh, we can trust the Taliban. They'll look out for us. Well, look, we honor those brave men and women who gave their lives. The sad part is that they did not have to lose their lives had that been handled properly. Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Sergeant Nicole L. Gee, Staff Sergeant Darren T. Hoover, Corporal Hunter Lopez, Lance Corporal Riley McCullum, Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Lance Corporal Kareem Nikoi, Corporal Dagan Page, Sergeant Johanny Rosario Picardo, Corporal Humberto Sanchez, and Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz. We pray for their families, their loved ones, and we thank all of them for their service to our country, and we honor these brave men and women for their sacrifice in behalf of our country. But let me make something clear. This has been an ongoing theme of really every program I've done, and my speeches and talks in general. If you were to ask yourself the question, what would be in the best interest of the United States of America in any foreign policy or domestic policy issue? You ask yourself that question, and you began to reason through it, and you came to some conclusions. Okay, well, in the best interest of America, for the best interest of the American people, we should do A, B, and C. Okay? You can count on the Biden administration to do exactly the opposite. If A, B, and C are in the best interest of the United States of America and the American people, you can count on them to do X, Y, and Z. Now you say, well, why? And I think there are multiple reasons why they're doing the things they're doing. I said the number one reason is their own thirst, their insatiable hunger for power. So they can't operate in the best interest of the American people because those interests often, almost never, align with their own quest for power. And when there's a conflict between those two, and when the interests of the American people don't even count, that's not even part of the analysis. That's not even part of the issue. Their power agenda is part of the issue. And that's, in fact, that's the whole issue, their power agenda. You can't explain the things they do any other way. I mean, I haven't researched this lately, but I think like $80 billion worth of equipment that we left in Afghanistan for the Taliban and for who knows who else, maybe even communist China. Don't hold me to that figure, but it was a vast array of equipment, some of it very high tech, that we abandoned in Afghanistan. Not to mention the horrible debacle of having our own people rescued, having to be rescued by nonprofit organizations that set up their own rescue missions because the Biden administration did not plan sufficiently and did not give the Americans who were there a sufficient amount of time to evacuate safely, and instead, in many cases, left them stranded there. Not to mention some of our allies, of course, the people who actually did help us on the ground, that some of our servicemen and women will attest to how helpful they were also stranded. And then you've got 13 lives destroyed. Now, immediately, there was discussion of the fact, had he postponed it? Had he planned better for it? Had he kept, I think it was Bagram Air Force Base, open because it was a much more secure facility and much easier to defend and much easier as a liftoff point? There are any number of things he could have done that would have made the situation better. Why didn't he do them? Say, well, is that the same reason? You got the same reason for that, which is power. Well, look, I think it still boils down to that because here again, they're only operating in their own interest, not the best interest of the American people. But let me add one other thing. And here again, I think there's several factors. One other thing. I think there is a spirit. In fact, I don't think, I know. There is a spirit at work in the Democrat Party and the Biden administration, therefore, that seeks destabilization, chaos, anarchy, uncertainty. They want they want America in a state of crisis. Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. They want America in a state of instability because what they're hoping is that out of that can grow this revolution, or they can implement this revolution that they have in mind for our country. Folks, that's why the border is open. Notice the impact it's having on institutions. You've got even the mayor saying, of New York saying, we got to secure the border. And he's a dyed-in-the-wool leftist. I don't care what people thought as a police officer. He's a leftist. He's a leftist, and and another one of these race hustlers. I mean, he's just that's just the way it is. But even he's saying the border needs to be secure. Why? Because the pressure it's putting on New York City. Now, when you get the educational institutions, the medical institutions, housing, law enforcement, all of these institutions that support the culture, not to mention the impact on the American taxpayer, because money's got to be spent on all this. Trying to respond to this thing, it has a very destabilizing effect. That's what the mayor of New York is responding to. He's finding that it is making his city more difficult to govern. Not that he's doing a great job anyway. But that's what they want. You see, you bring society to a state of crisis so that you can implement the dramatic change that you want, and people are in a position where they more readily accept it because they don't see any alternative. Folks, COVID was their blueprint. mean, just think about how they operated during COVID. They used that opportunity to engage in gross abuses of power, lockdowns, forcing people to get a shot they didn't want, closing churches, closing the schools. Just one thing after another. Power grabs everywhere you look. Censorship. No, that's disinformation. We can't allow you to say that. In America, you can't allow me to say that? What? I mean, what is this? Do we have an American government or an American Politburo? But that's where they went. We in Virginia, perhaps one of the worst governors in the history of the state, and a truly despicable human being, Ralph Northam, is the guy who wouldn't shake my hand after a debate. And these are the people always pointing their finger at others. Oh, they're racist, they're racist, they're racist. I tell you, leftists are the biggest racists on the planet. They really are. They really are. But he established a curfew in Virginia. So nobody was allowed out from midnight to 5 a.m. Now ask yourself the question, how in the world is that supposed to help COVID? It doesn't. But you know what it did? It established, I'm the governor. I've got the power to shut you in. I've got the power to turn your home into a prison if I want to. And there's nothing you can do about it because COVID has forced me to exercise this kind of power. See, the crisis reveals the true character of these folks. And now we're seeing articles being written about it now. We don't know what the lie. I said it all along. And by the way, I never had the shot. My wife never had the shot. But we said it all along the way. There's no telling what the long-term consequences of this thing will be. And with those, we skeptics were called, well, I forget what some of the names that they came up with, but obviously, you know, we were told that conspiracy theorists, that was one, your conspiracy theorists. We said, you know, this thing came from, I called it the communist Chinese Wuhan virus. That was my name for it. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Now, all the stuff that was dismissed as conspiracy theory and disinformation and misinformation and all of that, now we're finding out it was all true, and what we were being told were all lies. And what did the lies lend themselves toward? Them exercising absolute power over everything and everybody. Shut down a whole economy, spent a whole bunch of money turning people into government dependents. We still haven't gotten over that yet. You see what I'm getting at? This is what one of the things, when you see things happening and you think, my goodness, that's so disruptive, that's so destructive. I mean, come on, that doesn't even make sense. And it doesn't make sense to you as a rational thinker if you're thinking positively and you're thinking about how do we build, how do we create, how do we make things better. It doesn't make sense. But it makes perfect sense if you're trying to destroy. It makes perfect sense if you're trying to turn something to ashes, thinking that you can recreate it into something that more suits your desires. Your desire for power, your desire for self-aggrandizement, your desire for control over other people. See, that's what's going on. That's why we lost 13 servicemen and women in Afghanistan. That's why we left all that equipment there. That's why we ended up abandoning Americans there, because they weren't interested in any, they weren't interested in helping. They weren't interested in building. They were interested in destroying. Now, let me say something else to you that needs to be said here, because it will fill in a couple of blanks. I am not saying to you that they sit around in a room and say, okay, well, how can we be more destructive? I'm not saying that at all, because I don't believe that's happening. Here is what I am saying to you, that the spirit that animates them and informs them compels them to behave destructively, compels them to always put themselves first and not to give two hoots about what happens to the American people, because that is the spirit of Satan. That is the spirit of Antichrist. And that is the spirit that animates them. I don't think they even consciously think through it, except if I've got to make a decision, which way do I feel is the right way to go? It's always the way that creates more hurt, more pain, more hardship for the American people, and more power for them. There's no question about it. I mean, think about this. Does it make any sense at all for the United States of America to have as a central focus of its foreign policy the promotion of homosexuality and transgenderism? Does that make any sense? But that's exactly what Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, said is a major focus, a top priority of American foreign policy, is to promote the LGBTQ agenda. Now I ask you, you sit back and you say, okay, well, how does that help us? I mean, how does that help the American people? They must be trying to help the American people some way. No, that's not what it's about. It's about tightening their grip, their slave-like hold on the people who have fallen prey to that lifestyle, and the people who support it because their minds have been perverted. God has given them up to reprobate minds. The people who support it so that they can continue to believe that, oh, these are the people that are advancing our agenda. What they're really doing is trying to enhance their power base, and I really believe not only in America, but all over the world. Because between the people who are adherents and practices of that perverse life, what sense does it make for the spokesperson, John Kirby, for the National Security Agency to stand on the stage during a press briefing and say, it is a sacred obligation of the military to provide abortions? Well, wait a minute. Forget about how you feel about abortion. How is that a sacred obligation of the military to kill unborn babies? That's a sacred obligation? Say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, well, not if you're a straight-thinking, right-thinking human being, it doesn't. But if you are a person who is bent on destruction, the spirit of destruction is what animates you, killing unborn babies turns you on. I mean, and look, folks, let's be clear about this. You won't hear this said by others, but I want you to reflect on it, because you'll find that it is the truth. Killing unborn babies turns these Democrats on. It turns these LGBTQ activists on. It turns these radical feminists on. There's something about it that appeals to them. I believe they get some kind of godlike kick out of the idea, I can kill a human being and get away with it. I simply won't acknowledge that it's a human being. I simply won't acknowledge that it's life, and I can get away with it. And we can kill them by the millions and celebrate it. That's a bloodlust cult. And its goal is destruction and destabilization and pain and heartache. Look, I've got to go. I've got to do another interview. But God bless each and every one of you. Go to my website, ewjacksonforpresident.com. Make the best contribution you can. Tell people about it, about my candidacy. And if you go to a newspaper or online, anything like that you're reading, and there's a comment section, you can say, why aren't you acknowledging E.W. Jackson's candidacy? I need you to do that for me. They need to see that there's grassroots support for me running for president. And eventually, they will acknowledge us. God bless each and every one of you. I love you. I'm praying for you. Please pray for me. Stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up, because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side.